Hello and welcome to the program. The ongoing war in eastern Ukraine has caused a range of environmental problems. The majority of them are intertwined with the region's history of intense industrialization and mining. The Donbas ecosystems and natural resources have been affected by fires, mining and military activities, and the situation has only grown more dire. To talk more about this, we're joined in the studio today by Duprey, advisor for the Hounds human rights organization. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So first question, you made this published report called Assessing Environmental Impacts of Armed Conflict, the Case of Eastern Ukraine. Now, as far as I know, the first reports highlighting the environmental consequences of the war were published in 2015. What is unique in this report?
This report is different for two reasons. The first reason is because we don't actually only look at the environmental consequences of the war, but we look at the actions taken as a result of the war which have created these environmental consequences. So it's not only looking at the consequences themselves, but what actions have been taken as a result of the war that have created these environmental impacts. That's the first reason. The second reason is because we did an in-depth analysis from analyzing 4 main locations in the eastern province to try to get a representative sample and to go in depth to talk with local people who are actually living around these major industrialized sites, to speaking with representatives from the national authorities, to speaking with individuals which are working within these industrialized sites, to find out comprehensively what exactly are the major effects on the local population there. Because what we're concerned about is not only the environmental impacts of the war, but how these environmental impacts affect the people. And ultimately, that's what's the most important aspect of our research, is how are these environmental problems affecting people which are located in the region of conflict.
Now, where are those four regions? What are the 4 points?
Well, the 4 sites that we looked at the first was in Toretsk, some of the coal mines which are located there, and to see some of the factors affecting the maintenance and upkeep of the coal mines. The second one was Bakhmut, agrarian pig farm. They have one of the largest pig farms in Europe, I believe, there. And there's been very serious consequences as a result of the war, which we can speak about later if you wish. The third one is the third one was the phenol plant, which is located in Novorodsky, which is a major issue. And the final one was Adiivka coke plant.
Right,
so those are the 4 ones which we actually...
The hotspots, basically.
The hotspots. But it was mainly to get in-depth understanding of what was happening through speaking with local people who are actually living in the region, as well as experts, in order to get a comprehensive understanding of the situation on the ground.
Now, before the war erupted, Donbas was already a heavily industrialized region. How does the conflict influence this process and this already unhealthy and polluting process?
It affects it in 2 ways. One of them is positive, which is kind of unusual. You would not expect that, but because of the fact that it was one of the most industrialized regions in Europe, and because of the war, a lot of the plants had to close down because they can't function, because they can't economically function, and also for safety issues. And so as a result of that, air pollution has actually been mitigated, because a lot of the air pollutants which were emitted into the atmosphere have died down now because a lot of the plants were closed. On the other hand, you have a situation where there is constant shelling back and forth, and you have some very industrialized sites there which are at risk of being impacted as a result of the war. So there are some very serious potential environmental consequences as a result of the shelling, and also as a result of the lack of maintenance, because maintenance is a major issue. When you have 2 sides which are fighting each other and you have a gray zone in the middle, it's very difficult to get an agreement in order for them to be able in order for officials to be able to access these sites and to maintain them. So maintenance is a major issue.
Now, that's an interesting point that you're raising here, the maintenance issue. I'm thinking about the mines and the coal mines. I think it was last year there was this problem with coal mines on occupied territories, which is getting flooded. It was getting flooded, and in the 70s, USSR did some nuclear testing there, which could raise a major issue. What's with the mine? How to settle this problem with the flooding of the mines here? And is it a major problem?
I agree. I mean, of course, not all of them have radioactive material in it, but it's just the fact that mines have to be pumped.
Yes.
So they eventually become flooded, and there's acids in the mines which can actually flood into the waterways. And as you know, Severodonetsk River and also the water basin, which basically provides the water source for millions of people who live in that region, if it becomes flooded with acids, either the groundwater or the surface water, it can create major problems. So what needs to be done is there needs to be regular pumping of these mines which have been abandoned in order to avoid them from flooding.
Now, some experts called the issue in Donbas a reverse Chernobyl, in the matter that Chernobyl was a big catastrophe and then it became kind of a sanctuary where a few human beings were living. Basically now it's kind of, wouldn't say healing, but reeling, really. And some experts call Donbas a reverse Chernobyl, in the matter that toxicity there could last for even longer than Chernobyl. What's your stance on this matter?
I mean, I don't really know how long the environmental impacts could last for. You would have to speak with an expert scientist and talk about specific contaminants to be able to give an in-depth explanation of that. But what I do know is that there are a lot of people who live in that region, millions of people, who will be negatively impacted if there's a major catastrophe. And there's already been issues where there's been, for instance, leakage at the Bakhmut agrarian pig farm that actually contaminated the waterways, and local people got sick and a few cows died in one of the local villages. So it's a major issue for people who live there now. And when you think about when the hostilities end, people will want to relocate and move back to these regions. And if they're contaminated because of environmental pollutants, then the chances of people moving back there and trying to start a normal functioning life again are very, very low, because if there's environmental problems and you don't have clean water to drink and you don't have fresh air to breathe, it's something that actually, basically mitigates people from wanting to return back to areas where there was conflict.
Now, there's another consequence, it's quite an interesting consequence here, is the ban on hunting wild animals and apex predators like wolves, and the fact that because of the war and civilians shouldn't have rifles and shouldn't hunt apex predators, basically they proliferate, and there's been numerous attacks, not numerous, but more and more attacks from wolves, which are not scared of civilians and people anymore, and the spread of rabies here. There's a dilemma here, how to control a population of predators without endangering the life of civilians who should be hunting them?
Well, again, it's not my expertise to say what should be done, but what I know that, of course, is very understandable is why they don't allow civilians to carry weapons in the region. The region is an area of conflict, and how can you decipher who is a militant and who is not a militant if people are walking around carrying weapons? So it's completely understandable why they have that rule, but it's up to experts to decide how that actually would be able to be mitigated. Perhaps they could do something such as euthanize the wolves, or try to control the wolf population, or try to control the wild boar population, which is actually also has increased as a result of the war. But again, I'm not somebody who can make those recommendations. I'll leave that up to the experts.
Now, in the prologue, in the intro of of the report, there is this interesting quote on the fact that it studies the environmental impacts of the war not only in eastern Ukraine but in other conflicts area around the world. How do you create? Is it the first step to create a methodology to work in these areas?
That's what I believe and what I hope for with this policy paper is that it can be used as a framework for other areas of conflict, because there was a UN resolution in 2016, I believe, which is the purpose of this UN resolution was to say that that there needs to be a comprehensive analysis by national governments on the environmental impacts of the war. And I think that this was actually one of the first comprehensive reports on that. And what we would hope in the future is that, and what we would like to do, we've actually been actively fundraising for this through international sources, would to be able to develop a database which would then be used by not only by national experts, ecological experts, and experts in chemical compositions and chemical compounds and how they interact with the soils, but also could be used as kind of a live database for local people to be able to insert data when they see environmental problems and environmental crimes in order to raise public awareness, because as you know, once there's public awareness, then the national governments are more apt to react and to be engaged in trying to solve environmental problems that happen. So we really do believe that this is a very original policy paper that was developed, that the methodology can be used and applied to other countries around the world, and hopefully in the next upcoming month or two we'll be able to have the financing together to develop this database and to train experts on the front lines on how to use it and to actually implement it in practice. And once that is done, then this could also be, again, the same methodology could be applied to other countries.
So in between a textbook and a database, basically, for experts.
Kind of.
Okay.
But also to train local people on how to use the database, because what's very interesting is if you look at a lot of the work that has been done, they're using information, environmental information, which is coming from posts, and like government posts, where they're doing expert analysis on the chemical compositions in the water, or they're measuring air quality, and these are basically government posts where they're taking samples. But actually, when you're dealing with an area that has over 1,500 active industrial sites or industrial sites that need to be protected, there's an opportunity at any one point for some issue to happen, for instance, a breakage in a pipe, or for a spill of some chemical substance, or for people to be illegally dumping their waste somewhere. And through citizen activism, you can be able to keep update on this, on what's happening, because local citizens are basically existing all along the front lines. And they're the first ones to see what's happening and to be able to react to that, which then, of course, can be triangulated through other sources, through the national government coming and collecting soil samples, but to raise the awareness of what's happening to national authorities and to the general public, a database like this would be very helpful.
Now, and to conclude this interview, you raised an interesting issue in the recommendations at the end of the report, which calls for the militants for an immediate ceasefire for the inspection and maintenance of facilities that are at high risk for catastrophic failure, and you call for a creation of a green corridor for regular inspections. Do you think that's an interesting angle here? And can conclude by that, do you think that could ecological consequences, and as you said, awareness of these, might be an angle to pave a way to ceasefires between the two parts at one point?
It could be.
Can it be used?
It could be, because it could put public pressure on the militants and also the national government of Ukraine, because I think with public awareness, with pressure, you can actually get government institutions to do something. Because right now, what's happening, you have the OSCE, which is the mitigating partner, the independent body, which is trying to make negotiations for a ceasefire between the two sides. And very often, this is a lengthy process, difficult to happen, and very often it doesn't happen. They're not able to get a ceasefire, and it's too dangerous for the government be able to go in and try to maintain these sites, or for militants to come in and to try to do something to the sites which are of danger. But maybe with more public pressure, both coming from the Ukrainian government side, the public here, but also the victims who are caught into this situation and are living in the occupied territories, to be able to also put some pressure on the militants to agree to a ceasefire, to try to protect and to treat these sites, which are of very high danger, because it's a danger to both sides, both this side and for the militants, because if the waterways get contaminated, the local people aren't going to be happy.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for this overview. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio today. That was Brendan Duprey, advisor for the Hounds human rights organization. Thank you for watching the program and stay tuned for the rest.